In the heart of New York City, where the elite dine and the famous gather, Dennis Lowry walks the streets unnoticed. To the world, he's just another well-dressed man blending in with the crowd. But in the world of food and dining, Dennis is a giant, a respected restaurant critic whose reviews can make or break a restaurant. His reputation is built on one guiding principle: anonymity. Dennis never reveals his identity when he dines out, ensuring that he experiences a restaurant the same way any ordinary customer would. Tonight, however, he's about to visit Henix, one of the city's most prestigious restaurants. What starts as a simple meal will turn into something far more impactful. Dennis will witness firsthand how a lack of respect for every guest, regardless of their appearance, can lead to a downfall no one saw coming. This is a story of judgment, arrogance, and how one quiet critic can change the course of an entire restaurant's future. Dennis Lowry wasn't just any food critic. He was a legend in the culinary world, known for his sharp wit and brutal honesty. For years, he had built a reputation as one of New York's most respected voices in restaurant reviews. His name carried weight, and his words could either catapult a restaurant into stardom or destroy its reputation in a single paragraph. But what set Dennis apart from the rest wasn't just his expertise in food. It was his commitment to anonymity. While other critics might arrive with cameras, scribbling notes, Dennis preferred to blend in. He never revealed his true identity when dining out, ensuring that every experience he had was authentic, untainted by special treatment or preconceived expectations. This gave him the freedom to assess not only the quality of the food, but also the service, ambiance, and the overall treatment of guests, especially those who weren't wealthy or famous. Tonight, Dennis had made a reservation at Henix, one of the most exclusive restaurants in New York. The restaurant was famous for its luxurious ambiance and elite clientele. Celebrities, CEOs, and influencers flocked there regularly. But Dennis wasn't interested in the glamour or the star-studded guests. He was there to do what he did best: observe, evaluate, and critique. His goal was simple: to experience Henix as any average diner would, without the preferential treatment often given to those who were known or recognized. He knew that a true test of any restaurant's quality wasn't just in the taste of the food, but in how every guest was treated, regardless of their status. This evening would reveal just how well Henix could measure up to that standard. As Dennis approached Henix, the gleaming lights of the restaurant reflected off his polished leather shoes, and his tailored navy blue suit made him blend seamlessly with the upscale crowd strolling along Fifth Avenue. From the moment he set foot inside the grand entrance, he could sense the opulence surrounding him: crystal chandeliers, polished floors, and elegantly dressed patrons at every table. However, Dennis wasn't there to admire the grandeur. He was there for the experience, and he was about to be judged before he even had the chance to sit down. Brandy, the head waitress, greeted him at the door with a look that immediately told Dennis she had made up her mind about him. Her eyes flicked over his suit, and though it was undoubtedly expensive, there was something about him that didn't quite fit her expectations of a high-end clientele. With a sharp smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she asked, "How can I help you?" Her voice dripped with condescension, as if she doubted whether someone dressed in a suit, but not in a manner of the elite, had any business in such an exclusive establishment. Dennis, unfazed by her tone, calmly confirmed his reservation. "I have a reservation under Lowry," he said, his voice steady. Brandy's eyes narrowed slightly as she scanned the list on her podium. Her fingers skimming the names, she hesitated just long enough for Dennis to notice her skepticism. "Are you sure?" she asked, emphasizing the words high-end, as if to say, "This place isn't for you." After a long pause, she sighed, waved her hand dismissively, and pointed to a small, cramped table near the kitchen. It was clear this was not a simple seating arrangement. It was a subtle insult. The prime, spacious tables by the windows were reserved for those deemed worthy by Brandy's standards: the celebrities, the influencers, the people who were known. Dennis, however, would be left in the shadows, far from the luxury others would experience that evening. Yet Dennis didn't flinch. With a quiet nod and a faint smile, he accepted the table, knowing that this treatment would become the key to his review. As Dennis settled into his cramped table near the kitchen, the stark contrast between how he was treated and how the other patrons were served became glaringly obvious. From his vantage point, he had a front-row seat to Brandy's flawless service to the high-profile guests seated at the prime tables by the windows. A young couple, dressed in designer clothing, sat comfortably at one of the most coveted spots in the restaurant. Brandy greeted them with a warm, almost flirtatious smile, laughing at their jokes and engaging in friendly conversation. She was attentive, always ready with suggestions from the menu, topping off their wine glasses and ensuring they had everything they needed. The couple's every whim was met with a genuine effort to make their dining experience as perfect as possible. Yet when her gaze flicked in Dennis's direction, there was no smile, no enthusiasm. He was simply another body in the room to be ignored. She passed his table without even making eye contact, her movements quick and dismissive, as if his presence didn't warrant any attention. Dennis watched as she continued to lavish attention on the other wealthy, predominantly white patrons, each conversation warmer than the last, each plate delivered with the kind of care one would reserve for the restaurant's most important customers. Meanwhile, Dennis sat in the corner, watching the world go by, a silent observer of the disparity in service. His food was yet to arrive, and no one had checked in on him. The more he observed, the clearer it became. Brandy's judgment wasn't based on the quality of the customer or their taste, but on appearance. Wealth and status determined whether someone would receive her best service. Dennis, clearly not fitting the mold of what Brandy expected in a VIP, was relegated to the sidelines, ignored and dismissed. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Dennis wasn't just another diner. He was one of the most respected food critics in the city, and while she might have written him off, he wasn't bothered by the poor treatment. Dennis had been in enough restaurants to recognize when something wasn't right, and tonight, it was abundantly clear. He sat back in his chair, not allowing his irritation to show. There was no need to react, no need to let her ignorance affect him. He would observe, he would wait, and he would record everything. In the end, it wasn't his patience that would be tested. It was Henix's reputation. Dennis knew that. As the evening wore on, Dennis sat at his table, patiently observing the flow of the restaurant. The sounds of clinking glasses and cheerful conversation filled the air as waiters moved swiftly between the tables, delivering gourmet dishes to the wealthy patrons. Every table seemed to be served with meticulous care and attention. The young couple by the windows received their meals promptly, as did the businessmen and influencers scattered throughout the room. Their dishes arrived steaming hot, expertly plated with a level of precision that could only come from a restaurant that prided itself on perfection. Meanwhile, Dennis sat with his hands folded neatly on the table, his menu long since set aside, and his appetite slowly turning into frustration. His meal, a simple filet mignon with truffle mashed potatoes, had yet to appear. Minutes turned into half an hour, then 45 minutes. Still, no food. The waiters zoomed past him, serving everyone else in the room without hesitation. It was as though Dennis had become invisible, his presence utterly disregarded. He could feel the tension growing in his chest, but he knew better than to let it show. He was there to observe, to critique, not to make a scene. But even he had his limits. Finally, nearly an hour after he'd placed his order, Brandy arrived with his meal. She set the plate in front of him with a loud, unceremonious thud, making no effort to hide her disdain. The filet mignon, which should have been the centerpiece of the evening, was a far cry from what he had expected. It was overcooked, dry and chewy, something that would have been unacceptable at even the most modest of steakhouses. The truffle mashed potatoes, which should have been rich and creamy, were cold and lumpy, as though they had been sitting for far too long, neglected and forgotten. This wasn't just a poorly prepared meal. It was a glaring reflection of the restaurant's lack of care for customers who weren't deemed important. Dennis felt a pang of disappointment, but he remained calm. He knew this wasn't an accident. And then, just when he thought it couldn't get worse, Brandy returned for the final insult. The moment dessert should have been offered, when she should have checked in on how the meal went, she instead dropped the check on the table without a word. There was no offer of dessert, no polite inquiry if he needed anything else. It was as if she couldn't wait to get rid of him. Her body language closed off, her demeanor cold and dismissive. Dennis looked down at the check, his heart sinking, not because of the money, but because he had witnessed, once again, the disparity in service. This was no accident. This was deliberate. And yet, Dennis remained composed. He paid the bill without complaint, leaving a generous tip despite the poor treatment, knowing that his real work was just beginning. He wasn't going to make a scene. His review would speak louder than any confrontation ever could. As Dennis stood up to leave, he took one last look around the room. The polished glamour, the flawless service, the smiling faces, it all seemed so perfect from the outside. But beneath the surface, something was deeply wrong. He knew the reviews and social media buzz would focus on the luxurious setting, the ambiance, and the quality of the food. But tonight, Dennis had witnessed firsthand how the treatment of guests varied dramatically based on their perceived status. He didn't need to raise his voice, make a scene, or confront anyone. The way he had been treated spoke volumes on its own. Without a word, Dennis paid the bill and left a generous tip, a silent testament to the kind of service he had received, a stark contrast to the lavish attention given to other patrons. He didn't leave in anger or frustration, but with a quiet sense of resolve. This meal, this experience, would be the foundation of his next review. He knew the weight his words carried in the culinary world, and he was prepared to make sure that the truth was told. Dennis hadn't just been another customer. He had been a silent witness to the inequalities that existed in the very place that claimed to be a beacon of luxury. And as he stepped out into the crisp night air, he knew that his review the next day would hold the restaurant accountable. Henix's reputation would be shattered, not by a loud confrontation, but by the brutal honesty of a critic who had seen beyond the surface and into the heart of the establishment. The following morning, Brandy walked into Henix with her usual confidence, ready to charm the day's high-profile clientele. But as soon as she stepped inside, she noticed an unusual buzz among the staff. Whispers floated through the air, and her co-workers exchanged nervous glances. Something was off. When Brandy approached the manager's station, she found Mr. Kelvin standing there, his face tight with concern, a newspaper clutched in his hand. Without a word, he handed it to her. As Brandy unfolded the paper, her heart sank. There, on the front page of the city's most respected dining column, was a scathing review of Henix. Dennis Lowry's words tore into the restaurant, highlighting the poor treatment of guests and the blatant disregard for service based on appearance. While he never mentioned Brandy by name, the descriptions were unmistakable. The backlash was immediate. Cancellations flooded in, and social media exploded with outrage over the treatment described in the review. Mr. Kelvin's face turned red with anger and fear as he muttered, "This is going to destroy us." Henix's reputation had been shattered overnight, and Brandy, unknowingly, had played a pivotal role in its downfall. The lesson from Dennis Lowry's quiet yet powerful review is clear. Never judge a customer by their appearance, because you never know who they might really be. In a city like New York, where status and wealth often dictate how people are treated, this story reminds us that true success isn't about who you know or what you wear. It's about respect for every individual who walks through your doors. Dennis's anonymous review may have gone unnoticed by the staff, but its impact was immediate and profound. Henix's reputation crumbled, and the world saw that no one, no matter their social standing, should be treated as less than anyone else. So, as you move through your own life, remember this: kindness costs nothing, and every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of how they look on the surface. Treat others with respect, because you never know what impact your actions may have, or who you may truly be interacting with. If you enjoyed this story and the powerful message behind it, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a similar experience at a restaurant or seen unfair treatment based on appearances? Drop a comment below and let us know. Your feedback helps us bring more engaging content to you.